Hey Sammy, responding here to your video where you claim that atheists believe that everything arose by chance. As you can imagine, I take some exception to some of the stuff you said in the video, hence the response. First thing is, I don't think that you're responding to the not by chance argument in the same fashion that atheists tend to make it. Generally, that's brought up in the context of evolution of life forms, which, as I said, you don't talk about in this video, so I'll just recap very briefly. The basic idea is that creationists tend to criticize evolution by saying, how could all these life forms have evolved by chance? And well, not the atheist response, but the scientific response is that evolution is not a chance process. There's some initial chance, some initial randomness involved in selecting, for any one offspring, which traits it gets from its mother and its father. But in terms of the broader question of which traits get passed down generation by generation, that's not at all random. That's natural selection. It's which traits are best suited to the environment are the ones that are going to get passed down. But as I said, you don't really talk about evolution, so we'll leave that aside for now, and go on to what you do talk about, which is more of these cosmological scale phenomena. Questions, like, how did galaxies form? How did the Earth form? How did, say, the first, non-life to life transition happen? Which I agree, evolution doesn't explain. And yeah, I mean, science does not have, that nice non-random explanation of natural selection to explain, in any case where it's not a self-replicating system like life is. So the first point I would raise is that there are not as many separate random occurrences as you seem to imply. For instance, galaxy formation, star formation, and planet formation are really just three manifestations of the same law, which is gravity. If you put matter in a gravitational field, it tends to coalesce onto itself. So you're not talking about each and every single galaxy is not its own separate random chance occurrence. It's really only a few specific points that had to turn out the way that they did in order for us to be here. So the second question then is, I mean, this still leaves element of randomness, of chance, if you will, in deciding which way the universe was going to turn out. And here we come to something called the weak anthropic principle, which basically states that it's pointless to ask a question about why something is the way it is if it being any different would mean that you couldn't ask the question in the first place. So for instance, like, it's pointless for me to ask, why did one particular sperm and one particular egg come together to form me? Because if it were any different sperm and egg, it would not be me. It would be a different human being who might, just as ignorantly ask, well, why did this other particular sperm and this other egg come together to form this other me that's not, me. Hopefully that makes sense. We can scale this argument up, is the point. For instance, your point about, the sun being just the right distance from Earth to create hospitable conditions for life. Well, if it were any other distance from Earth, then it wouldn't be hospitable, and there wouldn't be anyone on Earth to be asking this question. So it's a pointless question. I mean, if the sun was a lot further away, well, maybe then Venus becomes the planet that's at just the right distance, and then all the Venusians would be asking, why is Venus at just the right distance from the sun? Which, it's not. It's just, a counterfactual. And then we take this even further. We ask questions like, what gravity has to fall off at, with 1 over r squared. We say, it has to do that in order for stars and galaxies and all of these structures to form. Well, if it was anything else, the structures wouldn't form, and we wouldn't be here to live on the structures to ask the question. So, yeah, we don't need to invoke chance. I mean, the very fact that we're here establishes that it had to have been this particular way to begin with. So then the question then really becomes, how important do you think we humans, as we know ourselves, are? If you believe that we humans, as exist today, occupy some privileged place within the universe, within all possible existences, then yeah, I would agree you have to invoke a god, because if you want to say that the goal, that the end purpose was us as we know ourselves today, yeah, there was a very specific set of initial conditions that had to lead to us, in which case it would be reasonable to say, oh, well, the only reason that one particular set of initial conditions was chosen was by some creator. On the other hand, if you, like myself, and I think like a lot of other atheists, don't place humanity on such a high pedestal, if you're willing to say, there's no particularly good reason why we had to evolve, why we had to come into existence, then it becomes a lot easier to accept that, those initial conditions could have been any of a number of different things. I mean, if you tweak the dials a little bit, maybe we wind up with some sort of, energy being that is conscious, instead of humans. And I don't think that that's any less of that's any worse of an outcome, really. I don't think that I don't think that outcome is any less privileged than the outcome that generated us. Likewise, I mean, maybe if you tweak the dials too much of those initial conditions, maybe you wind up with a universe with no life. And I think that's also entirely possible. I mean, given that, we humans are just one species on one planet around one rather insignificant star in one of billions of galaxies in this universe, the idea that the universe had to be set up such that we could come into existence, I think is hubristic. I think it's far more likely that, the dials setting those initial conditions were spun randomly, and it just so happened to come up with a setup that led to us. We're just the happy accident of the way that the universe is created. And if you spun the dials to something different, some other species would have been the happy accident, or no species would have been the happy accident. And I think that it places entirely too much emphasis on our own importance as human beings to say that the universe must have been set up in such a way that we could wind up being here. I think it's, when you say atheists believe that that these initial conditions, that everything arose by chance, yeah, I mean, for me, you're right.